I don't want an HOA. I've heard many of you say this to me as you're thinking about buying property in the Rapid City and Black Hills area. So are there HOAs in Rapid City and the Black Hills? Hey everybody, it's Tristan Emond with Mindful Living Realty, a realtor right here in Rapid City, South Dakota, the gateway to the Black Hills. So you would think, in the state of South Dakota, which is a very agricultural state, on the west side of the state, where the nearest towns over 30,000 people are 5 hours away, that, there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of regulations, there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of HOAs, and you could probably do whatever you want. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. I've had a lot of people that said, hey, I want to buy a property and I want to bring my chickens. It's crazy how many properties have restrictions against chickens. So let's get into what kind of an HOA scenario you can expect in Rapid City and the Black Hills. All right, so first of all, your HOAs that you've heard scare stories about, you're probably not going to have quite as many of those in the Rapid City and Black Hills areas. Now, in some of the more high-end, pricier neighborhoods, that's when the HOA is starting to get a little more serious. You start seeing things happen a little bit more on that end. Now, most subdivisions that you live in, even if they're a subdivision in the Black Hills somewhere with a 5-acre parcel, they will have covenants. Now, those covenants, also called cc&rs, those are rules and regulations, restrictions on the land that you purchase, whether the house is on it or not, that stay with the property as long as those covenants are in effect. And generally speaking, those covenants have a perpetuality to them, saying, yeah, after 25 years, if nobody renews this, it automatically renews. So usually if the covenants are recorded on our property, which means that they are also be listed in the county database, that means that those covenants, though that black and white, is sticking with the property. Now, some of the neighborhoods have an HOA type structure where you pay a monthly fee. Really, that HOA structure is really there to just, collect the money for the water, to take care of the water system in the neighborhood if it's a community well, or to take care of the roads, those kind of things. So sometimes the rules and regulations are kind of soft, but they still have the HOA structure to take care of those other things. The majority of your covenants in the Black Hills area are kind of your general, take care of your property, don't have a business running out of property, mostly like, don't have a hair salon where people are coming back and forth. They'll talk about the size of the home that can be built. They'll talk about whether or not you can allow mobile homes or not. They'll talk about what kind of animals you can have on the property. My thought forms on kind of what happened was when a lot of these developments were established back in the 70s and 80s, that was the time when people were coming here, building their big, huge log homes, and they didn't want to have Farmer Fred next door. So they made the covenants of the neighbors so that you could have horses, because horses are cool, but you couldn't have any livestock or chickens or anything that's going to disturb the general community. And of course, they wanted everything to look the same, so they wanted to make sure that the covenants are in the place so that you didn't bring in your weird house or your condominium or those type of things. Now, in the subdivisions that have the HOA that you might be talking about with the little more stricter enforcement, those have things such as no parking in the street. A lot of times they'll have clubhouses or they have pools that the HOA pays for. And then, of course, they have the meetings, of course, where they discuss the rules and change rules if needed. A lot of times these neighborhoods also won't allow you to park your RV or your camper on the street or on the lot. You have to go put that away out of sight. Generally speaking, I haven't heard too many scare stories of the neighbor coming around with a ruler, measuring grass, and that kind of thing. And just because you live within the city limits doesn't mean that your subdivision within the city might have covenants as well as the city rules and regulations. The city just wants to make sure that you take care of your property. I've had a couple situations where the lawn was getting really long and my clients needed to go mow their lawns, and there was like a tree branch that was getting in the way of viewing down the road, so they didn't know where to turn on the corner lot. So the city said, you guys got to cut the tree. Although those kind of things are pretty normal. If you got a bunch of unlicensed cars on blocks, you're going to say something about that, and just the general taking care of your property kind of stuff. Now, it's possible that the covenants have expired, but because it's a legal document, that takes some, legal people to really interpret what's going on there. So if you're buying a property and it has covenants recorded, the title company is going to send me those documents. I'm going to forward those on to you. Now, you can talk with a lawyer as far as whether they're expired or not, but generally speaking, I'm going to forward those to you and say, hey, here it is in black and white. Make sure you're aware of what's written. With the explosion of Airbnb, Vrbo, and nightly rentals, the question always is, hey, can I rent out my property? And the answer is, of course, it depends. If you're looking to rent out the property in a yearly scenario where you have one tenant for the entire year, typically speaking, that shouldn't be a problem. But if you want to rent it out nightly, then we have to look at the covenants to see what they say. See what the rules and regulations say about that. Now here's where this gets a bit foamy. Back when the majority of the covenants were written, Airbnb wasn't a thing. There were some, vacation homes in the hills, but it wasn't a very popular investment type opportunity that we look at it as now today. So your covenants may not specifically list, hey, you may have nightly rentals, you may not have nightly rentals, but it probably will say something to the effect of no business activity. So the question comes up, well, is an Airbnb in a property that's yours considered to be business? Now, I've always cautioned my clients buying a property that they want to use for Airbnb to say, hey, this is what it says in black and white. And, depending on how people interpret that, that might be a problem for you down the road if they determine that, hey, that's business activity in your property. However, there was a South Dakota court case that ruled that having a short-term rental was within the limits of your personal residence. So based upon that ruling, you should be able to handle those short-term rentals even though it says no business use. However, with the popularity of the nightly rentals, there have been some communities in the Black Hills that have been a little bit overgrown with those nightly rentals. Some of the residents that have been there forever don't like the fact that they don't have the peace and quiet that they used to have. So I know of a couple communities like down in Custer that are getting together as an HOA or as a community and are working on the regulations to no longer allow those short-term rentals. So that's one of the things you have to consider when buying a property for the short-term rental scenario. You also have to consider the county rules. Pennington County at the moment has the most strict rules when it comes to setting up an Airbnb, a short-term rental. They're also looking to revamp those rules, which caused some stir among the Rapid City and other Pennington County short-term rental owners because they were getting kind of strict and they wanted to make it a little more reasonable for everybody involved. Those meetings and decisions are still pending, so we'll see what happens probably in 2024 as far as what Pennington County does in regards to short-term rentals. Generally speaking, South Dakota has usually been a owner-friendly state, but with multiple complaints about noise and strange people walking around, we'll see what happens in the next few years with the short-term rental scenario. Now in Meade County, which is by Sturgis, Lawrence County and Spearfish, Deadwood and Lead, and even down in Fall River County, Hot Springs, and Custer County, those counties are considerably more lenient on the nightly rentals at this time. So if the nightly rental is the driving force behind you buying a property, I always recommend that maybe we get a stay out of Pennington County, we go into the other surrounding counties. That makes it a lot easier to do what you want to do. Now let's talk about buying bare land. Most of your acreages in the Black Hills are actually in some kind of subdivision. It might be 5-acre parcels or 40-acre parcels. Generally speaking, we're talking about someone who had lots of land and they subdivided it out so that they could sell it to individual owners such as yourself. When they decided to subdivide, they also then established covenants so that people who bought properties could have a certain set of rules and regulations, uniformity among the place that they are buying. That's the general idea for, if you want to buy a property, make sure that you don't have a lot of crap moving in. So the things that we need to look out for when it comes to bare land is, number one, type of building. Do they allow mobile homes? Do they allow any kind of structure? Or does it have to be a single family home and with certain type of features, etc.? Sometimes they get pretty specific on how it's got to look. Now there is a difference between modular homes and manufactured homes, so you kind of have to make sure we understand that as well. Modular home is one that's built off-site, but then it's trucked in and put onto a permanent foundation. A manufactured home still has the axles underneath, still can be put on a permanent foundation, so some land allows for modulars, but not manufactured. The other things it might not allow is anything that's a little bit different. I had somebody want to build a concrete dome type of house once. Maybe your straw bale home scenarios might not work for them, or the barn dominiums. So if you want to build something unique on your property, you want to make sure that the covenants allow for that. Some can get pretty specific as far as roof type, siding type, gotta have a garage, etc., etc. The other thing the covenants talk about is the square foot minimum size. This is where it gets really hard for the tiny home people because a lot of times their minimum size is over 1,000 square feet. Even in Pennington County alone, doesn't matter where you are in Pennington County, your minimum size for any lot there has to be 1,000 square feet. The other thing we need to look at is time to completion. A lot of times the covenants will state, hey, once you start building, you need to be completed in a year. So you might not be able to build the project yourself over years of time. A lot of times they'll talk about if temporary housing is allowed. So you can move your trailer on the property and live in your trailer while you're building a property. Sometimes they'll state how long you can have your trailer on the property. Sometimes it'll say you can't do that at all. It just depends on the covenants. And on the same story of the barndominiums, can you just build a garage and live in the top level until you're building your house? All those things we need to make sure that are allowed in the covenants. If you're looking to just park your RV somewhere and use that as a vacation retreat, gotta make sure that that's okay in the covenants. A lot of times in that scenario, we're looking for an area with no covenants. As you get further south towards Hot Springs and Custer, a few more properties have no covenants. So you can do a little more whatever you want to do. Those properties also tend to be, 15, 20 acres, and so that price really kind of goes up a little bit. I've had some people like, I just want a little piece of land, park my trailer, do my own thing, and only spend $50,000. That just doesn't happen right now in the Black Hills. And in Pennington County, if you do have your RV just sitting on a lot, they're going to require a septic tank to be installed after 6 months of living on the property. So yeah, can these covenants be amended or canceled? Of course they can, but it takes everybody getting together, drafting what they want to do, getting all that together to the lawyer so they can get drafted and presented to the county. Takes some money, takes some time, and it takes everybody in agreement, or it takes a certain percentage of the homeowners to agree to amendment. And this whole voting thing is detailed in those covenants. Now up in the Somerset subdivision, they had covenants that were about a book long. I mean, they were novel and a lot of really weird, wacky things. They decided as a community to dissolve the covenants. So they no longer have those covenants in that community. They are still part of the Somerset city, so Somerset has their regulations as far as, keeping your grass cut and that kind of thing. But that whole book that they had before, that's gone. So dissolving and canceling the covenants is a possibility, just takes a lot of work from everybody involved to make that happen. How does the enforcing of these covenants go? So this is where it gets interesting, because if you are part of that HOA, where the HOA has a governing body, then they have that power to enforce those covenants. In communities such as Copperfield Vistas, they have their own covenants, and you actually pay a yearly fee. It's not a very big yearly fee, but it's a yearly fee to take care of the park and also for that enforcement of those covenants. The city comes by, they take care of the streets and the water, etc., everything else. But the subdivision still has its own HOA, so they can enforce those rules accordingly. A number of the subdivisions, especially the ones within Rapid City, where Rapid City is taking care of streets, that kind of thing, don't have an established HOA. But the covenants still apply. Now, to enforce these covenants, you would take a bunch of community members to get together and say, hey, we don't like what these people are doing, and take it to court. So they'd have to get the lawyer fees, they'd have to do all the things to have to make this happen. And of course, once you start looking at what somebody else is doing, then somebody else can come back and look at what you're doing against the covenants. So enforcement without an HOA is kind of a difficult thing. It's costly, generally speaking. It only really happens if someone is really pissed at somebody else because of the money, etc., that goes out into such a project. But I'm still going to hand you those covenants and say, hey, here's what it says in black and white. Having a covenant war against your neighbors is not a great experience, I would imagine. I haven't had it happen before, but probably not something that really makes that living in that neighborhood a lot of fun. This all being said, there are a number of people that love an HOA. They love the fact that they can drive down the street and it's just this perfect, quaint little neighborhood. They love the fact that they can pay an HOA that takes care of the lawn. They love the fact that there's a pool that's nearby. They love the fact that there's a clubhouse in the subdivision that they can enjoy and utilize for their own use. So HOAs aren't all bad. You just got to be aware of what's there and make sure you're okay with living in that scenario. So what's your opinion of an HOA? Is it something that you would like to live in? Or would it be like, screw it, no covenants, I don't want anybody to tell me what I can do on my property? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Remember, love where you live.